let's talk a little bit about where you were when the book came into your life.
I lost my dad right before I started high school. I initially read it as a way to feel close to him. Here's this artifact from your dad's life that was really important to him. Are you gonna understand it?
How old were you when your dad passed away? Today we have a special guest, Sophie Newman. She began her writing career on the marketing team for Brene Brown. Her short stories and personal essays have appeared in outlets like the New York Times, Writer's Digest, The American Scholar, and the Saturday Evening Post. The book that changed her life is Siddhartha. So Sophie's favorite drink is an old fashioned. Cheers.
Cheers.
Let me know how you think we did.
All right, let's test this out. That's perfect for me. That's very whiskey forward, bitters forward. Not too sweet.
No cherry.
No cherry. Yum. Thank you.
Full disclosure, Sophie and I know each other pretty well. So a lot of the things that I would normally ask, like, what do you think of the library? It's irrelevant because you've played a part in all this.
Yeah.
So you would be, confirming your own contribution.
It's true. I'm a biased observer.
Before we talk about the book, let's talk a little bit about where you were when the book came into your life.
Yeah.
So how old?
So I was about 15, I want to say. So I was in high school.
What kind of a kid was Sophie at 15?
Oh gosh. I mean, I think like all teenagers, in a sense, that I was very lost, but thought that I had everything figured out at the same time. This book actually came into my life at a really difficult time too, because I lost my dad right before I started high school. This book was one of my dad's favorite books. So I initially read it as a way to feel close to him. And I was just, really heartened and, surprised that it resonated with me as much as it did with him.
How old were you when your dad passed away?
14.
So
this was about a year later.
How do you come about the conversation to figure out that that was a book you liked? How does that happen?
Well, so this was, it was recommended to me by my godfather. So basically his best friend knew that this was his favorite book. But, at 14, you're not at an age where you really, or at least I wasn't at an age where I really understood my parents or, thought of them as individuals outside of my life. And so I think it was hard for me at that time losing him because I felt like I also was losing that opportunity to get to know him. And so my godfather recognized what I was going through and thought that this would be kind of a way to get to know him, which I think makes sense because books are so personal to all of us, which is why we're here. And so I think, it was kind of a way to get some insight into his character, really.
How many books had you read up until then?
Oh gosh, I mean hundreds.
By 14, you'd read hundreds of books?
Yeah, I mean, short books as a kid. But
such an overachiever, Sophie.
I mean, I would say, yes, overachiever is one way to put it. I was also kind of a loner as a kid, super shy.
Really?
Yeah.
I take you as class president.
Oh no, I was definitely not. I was definitely always in the shadows.
Did you wear black all the time?
Not until high school, I would say. No, I was kind of, did I even have a style? I don't know. I wouldn't say I wore black.
Style wasn't important?
Not until high school. I would say that's when I started to want to have an identity and want to project that identity.
The over 100 books before you're 14, those books are escapes?
Yeah, definitely.
So you're alone and you escape into those books.
Yeah, I think that was definitely what books were for me. As a kid, I have memories of me like reading encyclopedias on the floor. Anything I could get my hands on. But my mom was also a teacher for a really long time. She recently retired. And so we always had like a really full library of books, and especially books for kids in the house, because that was kind of her specialty. So
what did she teach?
She taught third grade for a really long time and fourth grade, so elementary school.
Oh.
Yeah.
Was she your teacher?
No, she was not my teacher. That was not allowed at the school.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's fine.
They thought it would create conflict.
Am I off in thinking that a girl that is a loner that uses books to escape, your father passes away, and then somebody brings you your father's favorite book?
Yeah.
It's more than your father's favorite book because it's your insight into your father's escape?
100%. Yeah.
Unpack that.
I think with the case with Siddhartha is, how he saw himself. This was definitely an age where I was getting into like real novels, kind of like moving beyond children's literature and getting into some kind of heavier adult stuff. I remember specifically Siddhartha being part of kind of that transition. I was beginning to see, not only his escape, but maybe how he saw himself through this character of Siddhartha, which I can talk about more.
So the copy that you get, is it your dad's copy?
It was. Unfortunately, this one is not, because the other one is at my mom's house somewhere. But the copy that I had was his copy from his
Did he have
bookshelf.
notes in it?
He didn't have notes in it.
He didn't highlight?
He didn't.
Are you a highlighter?
I'm a highlighter. I have some highlights in here.
You don't highlight as much as me though, right?
No, I don't highlight as much.
Would you say I over-highlight?
I wouldn't say so. You just personalize. Yeah.
Okay, so it's his copy.
Yeah, so it's
How does that feel?
It had a lot of weight. Like, I think if I didn't like Siddhartha and if I didn't understand it, it would have been really disappointing, because it's like, okay, here's this, artifact like from your dad's life that was really important to him. Like, are you gonna understand it? So yeah, that's why I was like sort of surprised and, really grateful that I did, because I felt like, oh, I do have this insight. And rereading it, I reread it just this week and feel similarly attached to it, and am getting the same things that I, got out of it at 14, obviously from a very different perspective now. But but yeah, I think I still feel that connection to it.
Okay, so you get his copy of it.
Mm-hmm.
Do you talk to anybody about it?
No, I was very private at the time.
Even your mom?
I think I might have talked to my mom about it at the time.
But this is solely Sophie,
yes,
your dad in the book.
It was very private, just, the
Still
three of
loner.
us. Yes, exactly.
Okay, and so then you start reading the book.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know anything about the book beyond it's his?
No, I have no idea. I figured out pretty quickly that it's an older book. I mean, that's all relative. I think it came out in the early 20th century. Siddhartha is one of the names of the Buddha. So it has this kind of influence of Buddhist philosophy, which is something that I'm still not sure, I guess, how much my dad was into that, but he was into it enough to read Siddhartha, I guess. Although Siddhartha, I would say, is for everyone. It's not just for people who are interested in that, but it's definitely a part of it.
But does it come from a spiritual perspective?
Definitely. Yeah, I would say it's definitely like the ultimate melding of spiritual wisdom with human experience, which is also kind of the message of the book. Okay,
so you start reading the book. Do you remember where you were?
I remember reading it in bed at night. I did a lot of I read a lot for school because I was a good student, a very dutiful student. But I did read a little bit of my own stuff before I went to bed. So I remember it was a very cozy, intimate space. Similarly to when you wake up in the morning, I feel like when you go to sleep, you're almost already in a dream-like kind of space, which I think is a good place to approach this book from.
Do you remember the first part that connected with you, or your first impression, or what happens when you start reading it?
I remember being surprised how relatable it was. It takes place in 600 BC because it's actually at the same time as the Buddha, and the Buddha is actually a character in this book, but like a minor character, which is kind of funny. Like he's just like a side character to Siddhartha's quest. But I remember expecting it to be this really dense, like historical fiction that I wasn't gonna connect to at all. So so that was surprising.
That you connected to it and it was easy.
Yeah, it was easy. I mean,
You didn't have to work for it.
I didn't have to work for it. It's very readable. It has like a kind of a sense of humor, I think, that you have to get into. Like Siddhartha is from this priestly class in Indian society, in the society that he lives in, and he's super full of himself. Like in the beginning, he's a man who thinks he knows what's up and how to get it. And that's kind of his attitude. And I think we're meant to see him as that and not meant to see him as someone who really knows what he's talking about, at least in the beginning, because he kind of gets, broken down over the course of the novel.
Then is that the first impression of the book?
Yeah, I would say so.
And
just his
is
pride.
there any connection there between that and your dad?
I think maybe. I mean, based on what I know about my dad, like again, most of what I know about him is through stories of what other people have told me. I mean, when I look at their characters together, I can definitely see a resemblance in this desire to really be someone in the world and to figure out who you're supposed to be and to go out with a lot of confidence. I think my dad definitely embodied that, but I think he also struggled, like a lot of us do, with feeling like, no matter what he was doing, he wasn't finding out the meaning of life, or he wasn't finding the identity he was supposed to find. He was a lawyer, but before that he was a teacher, and he was never really happy with being a lawyer. He wanted to, he wanted to be a sailor. He wanted to sail boats. He wanted to, he wasn't really sure what he wanted, I think, like a lot of us.
But more, he wanted to be free.
Yeah, he wanted to be free.
And so at 15, how does that affect you? Like,
I feel like it made me grow up kind of fast, because I think it made me realize, even though I was so young at the time and did not have the experience to even fully understand the message of Siddhartha, I think I still knew that the message was that, wisdom comes from experience. I kind of understood that on like an intellectual level, even if I didn't have the life experience to fully understand that. I understood that it was gonna be like a long journey ahead for me in finding my own meaning.
Does that make you take more chances? Is that the outcome, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think it made me take more chances. I think it also made me realize that because one of the ideas that's explored in it and is part of Buddhist philosophy is this idea of seeking versus finding. So there's the idea that those who are always seeking are kind of missing the meaning in finding what they already have. And so that's the Buddhist message.
Wait, is that avoiding finality?
Yeah, it is avoiding finality, actually. Yeah, it's the ultimate avoiding finality. No, you're 100% right.
Does it affect you being a loner? Like, do you decide to put yourself out there more?
I don't know if I was ready to do that. I think maybe later.
You were still grieving?
Yeah, I was still grieving, and it was still hard for me to figure out how to put myself out there. I think I was not like Siddhartha in the sense that I was going around telling everyone that I knew what I was talking about.
You were more of a voyeur, more observant?
Yeah, yes.
At what age do you become the outgoing socialite that you are today?
I would say definitely towards the end of high school or in college. I feel like I was able to process my grief more, and I was able to, be more intellectually daring.
And you probably had some solid accomplishments that you felt confident
once I got to college, I was like, okay, I think what you're saying is true. It's like I've made it this far, so I'm probably
actually
okay.
good at these things, so I belong, kind of a thing.
Yeah, it was definitely related to a sense of belonging. I feel like, high school, we all go through the rigmarole of like not feeling like we belong, and I think. I went to a smaller college. I had close friends. I felt like everyone there was, intellectually curious. We were all kind of the same spirit, so it felt easier to be that way.
Okay, what are the other takeaways from the book?
This idea that wisdom comes from experience. So this is super important in Buddhism. It's super important to Siddhartha's path. It's basically the idea that no matter what experiences you have in life, you can learn from them depending on how you digest them and how you embody what you learn. So I think it's important to distinguish between knowledge and wisdom, right? So knowledge is facts. It's what you learn in books, what other people tell you should do. It's almost like an alchemical process that has to occur to move that knowledge from knowledge to wisdom, which is embodying knowledge.
Is the gap application?
Yeah, I think it's application, it's embodiment, it's understanding, it's knowing things. It's that moment. I really honestly think of that quote that's I think it's wisdom that a wise man imparts always sounds like foolishness to someone else. I think about that all the time. And it's always when I've had some kind of experience where something someone told me or I read about comes back to me and like slaps me in the face and is like, oh, of course, this is what this means. But, sometimes you have to go through the experience yourself to know.
That's got to be a part of why you're such a good listener too. You're a really good listener.
Thank you.
And a very it's almost like you listen and then you process. You don't judge. Most people judge and don't listen.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a part of that.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I think, because you have to listen to understand first, right? Before you can judge.
We're not all that good at it. Not all of us are good at that.
But yeah, I've always been a listener and I've enjoyed being a witness to how people are versus making that judgment.
What are the other takeaways?
Another point is kind of this desire Siddhartha has to be like spiritually enlightened is really strong. Like in the beginning, he's like, I'm going to go out and I'm going to be the best priest ever. My dad doesn't know anything about this. I'm going to leave my family. They don't know anything. So he goes, with his best friend. And then he thinks that the priests don't know what they're talking about or that, that's not really for him. So he leaves them. He falls in love with this woman. He ends up fathering a child. He goes through all these experiences and he feels like he still hasn't found his place. And it's not until the very end when he's kind of processed all those experiences that he realizes that he had his place the whole time. Like the meaning was right in front of him. It was what he was doing and he was trying to find it somewhere else. So I see that as kind of this lesson in balancing our human experiences with this kind of, you could call it a spiritual realm, or maybe, if you're not a spiritual person, just like a realm of knowledge or how you understand yourself or how you understand the meaning of life. I mean, that's something that all of us have to reckon with, I think. And so it's a balance between, you have to live your human life as much as you want to be a spiritual person or an intellectual person or whatever it is you want to be. You have to live your human experiences too.
So how were you closer to your dad after reading it? Or did you feel closer, I guess?
Yeah, well, I think I assumed, one has to make assumptions because I wasn't able to ask him what he got out of the book, but I assumed that what I got out of it, which was this desire to be free, like you said earlier, or to find meaning or to find peace or however you want to put that, that was something that he was really struggling with and looking for some kind of guide for. And I felt, the same way, even if I wasn't fully aware of it at the time. You know, you learn your parents are like grappling with the same questions that you are. It's like when you're a teenager, I feel like you think that everything is happening to you for the first time ever, and life is so hard, and you know, yeah, that no one has ever experienced that before, and then you realize it's literally a universal human experience, and your parents have gone through it, and they've been angsty too, and they've wanted to, you know, be free. And so I think it was kind of like fun in a sense to realize that my dad, you know, had grappled with those same questions, because like I said, I hadn't really thought of my parents as, you know, being that way, because Siddhartha is really like a young character for a lot of the novel. He's, you know, figuring it all out. So it was almost like I was able to see my dad's younger self, or maybe he was, you know, he was still grappling with those questions.
But in a sense, he humanized him.
It humanized him at an age where I was just starting to think of my parents as having, you know, the same experiences I was about to have.
Later on in life, like you share that same desire for freedom. Mm-hmm. Like you wouldn't like being a lawyer. You wouldn't like working in an office in a cubicle, or
I don't think so.
A ton of structure and just I would just say a ton of structure wouldn't serve you and your skill set, I don't think. So you have that in common.
I think so. And I think it was really hard for my dad, and, you know, in terms of having feeling like he had to fulfill this obligation to be a certain type of person in society. I mean, being a lawyer generally, at least from my family perspective, is a very, you know, respected position. It's it comes with a lot of kind of benefits in terms of how people see you. I mean, you say you're a lawyer, and people have certain things that they...
Doctor, lawyer,
you know, and it's all kind of set up. It's like you go to school, and then you are that thing. You get that title, you know? And I think that's something that I've struggled with at times too, is feeling like, yeah, you know, what's my role if I don't have this name of, you know, who I am? And that's something that I think is a really important lesson from this book too, is that, you know, in trying to become somebody, you're missing
that you already are somebody.
That you already are someone. You don't have to perform this kind of role in society. And I think, I mean, I say you don't have to.
The hierarchy and the perception does exist. Like,
it does exist. And that's the hard thing about it, is like you can't even say, oh, well, it's not true. People, you know, people are more open than you think. No, like people are judgmental. But I think you have to have the self-efficacy to say, well, I know how people see this, and people need to feel like they belong because it feels safer. But there is a way to kind of exist outside of that, but it has to come from your own experience. I think it's not going to come from other people telling you that it's okay, you know?
The fact that you haven't put yourself in that box or in those roles, was that conscious or was that unconscious as you went through school and started to decide what you were going to do? Were you thinking about your dad, or did you end up there intentionally or unintentionally?
It's a really good question.
And maybe it's a hybrid. I don't know.
I have two things to say about it. I think it was unintentional in a sense that while I was, on the one hand, not putting myself in that role, I felt really bad about that all the time. Like I felt like, oh, I should be you know, I should be an engineer, or I should be I should have this really specific title. And, you know, I felt like people that I went to school with were doing that. And it was, you know, I went to like a science and engineering school, so that was on me for doing that. But yeah, I felt like I was like sort of being left behind as people were going into these specific roles and kind of settling into them and being like, this is my identity. And I was like, well, I'm not, you know, any of these things. Am I ever gonna, you know, figure it out? So so I was feeling that way, but at the same time making choices where I was not putting myself in a role. So I think there was like a little bit of.
Would you feel claustrophobic when you would get close to that?
Yeah, definitely.
Is that how you describe it, as claustrophobic?
I think so. Yeah, I felt really, I would say maybe alienated. Like I felt like I was missing this thing that everyone else was getting. Like everyone else around me was like really happy and satisfied. And
you thought that thing was the title? Yeah,
the title, the sense that you were at peace with what you were doing and you were gonna just, you'd found this very specific path and you were just gonna stay on the path. And then that was it was all kind of laid out. The red carpet was just rolled out. It felt claustrophobic. It felt like alienating. At the same time, and this I was conscious of, having my dad die at that age gave me this sense of, oh shit, like we don't have forever to
play around,
to mess around. Yeah. And I think
it makes everything heavier.
Yeah. And so I think people say carpe diem or live every day like it's its last. But I think I really internalized that from that age onward where I was like, anything could happen at any point. It's we can't mess around with what we're doing. So I think that gave me an even stronger desire to feel, to be intentional about what I'm doing.
Are you able to get past that now and accept the contributions that you make to the world? Are you comfortable with that?
Yeah, I would say within the last couple of years, I've become more comfortable with it. And I don't know if it's just getting older or what, but yeah, I think I finally settled down on that front.
One thing that was interesting is when I was telling you about the person that introduced us.
Yes.
And how he described you.
Yes.
And how surprised you were.
Yeah, I was surprised.
That's why I ask if you're aware of your abilities and talent, or if you
yeah.
I mean, I guess you can't get too excited about it because nobody should.
Yeah, exactly.
That would be unhealthy.
Yes. But, we can't be too prideful.
But you can also enjoy it.
Yeah, and I think it's definitely a balance. I think, it's, are you being prideful, or maybe on the other end of that spectrum is low self-esteem, which is not a good thing either. So I think it's, it's a matter of knowing what you can contribute and, trying to embody that as best you can.
Yeah. So the thing that Angus said was that you and I had that in common in the sense that he wasn't saying this directly, but the understanding is there, is people have a hard time putting you or me in a box.
Yeah.
So they want to know what you do. They want an easy answer that's like, oh, doctor.
Yeah.
And if you're a bunch of things and you're interested in a bunch of things and good at a bunch of things, that's not easy to put in a box, right?
I'm curious what your experience has been with that.
Oh, I think I struggle with it in the sense that if I give somebody an easy answer, they're relaxed.
Yeah.
So people genuinely want to know most of the time, and I think you know this firsthand, maybe, that people assume I'm an artist, and they would have no idea that really I have business has been what I've done, right? But it's not that I'm not an artist. It's that they have to pick one of the two. And they can't imagine that I could be both and that they would be connected. But to me, they're very connected.
Yeah, of course they are. Yeah, because you're a whole complete person. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. No, it's like the ultimate nightmare for me, or used to be. Now I just, I'm like, whatever. Is yeah, you're at a party and someone says, what do you do? Which is.
I feel bad.
Yeah.
So I just feel bad because they just want an easy answer. They don't really, it's all very, it's small talk.
Yeah.
And what happens is I go from small talk that they want the formality of the small talk.
Yeah.
And I'm giving them I'm throwing books
Yeah.
at them.
I
They're
know.
like, no, stop. Just
No, I know. It's so
tell
true.
me you're a waiter.
Yeah, no, they're like waiting, because it's like waiting for the moment of recognition of like, okay, I know what that is, and I can say like a specific thing in response to that. But yeah, it's funny to try to think about like mixing that up and just saying like, just telling someone you're an alchemist or something and they have no frame of reference.
Oh, let's come up with something like that.
Yeah.
That would be funny. Maybe there's some obscure term. Maybe
Yeah.
somebody can put something in the comments that would work.
That would be great.
Yeah, it is hard.
It is hard.
And I always feel bad for the other person. I don't care.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. That's what I'm talking about in terms of self-efficacy. Because I think before I used to get really like, I would feel bad that I didn't have a specific answer and I would feel their judgment of that. And now I just feel like, I'm not going to be able to explain to this person and they don't want that anyway. And it's okay.
Yeah. The hardest maybe is my mom. Because when she tells people things and it gets back to me, I'm always like, oh my God, even my mom doesn't know what I do.
Yeah. Yeah, and maybe she doesn't. Maybe you don't even need to know. Like maybe articulating it is like, just decreasing its potential anyway.
The real question now for me is when you reread it recently, what about Dad? Now that you're more developed and...
Well, I think, I guess what I would say is it really made me realize how long you can struggle with these kinds of questions. Like, I think Siddhartha doesn't come to his, realizations until the end of his life. And, I think a lot of us can struggle, and not to say that I have everything figured out, but I think like in the last couple of years I feel like I've overcome some hurdles with this identity thing and this figuring out like who you're supposed to be in life. But I think those questions can really linger, and it just makes me wonder if my dad was really struggling with that forever, and just a lot of us can be struggling with that forever.
Well, I would imagine having the label of lawyer.
Yeah. You
can't veer far from that.
Yeah, he couldn't veer far from that, and he he really wasn't like a buttoned up kind of guy. I think, maybe in another lifetime he would have been like a sailor or something, or a mystic, but that was just, in a lot of ways what was expected of him. And I think that we all have to make a living. We have to figure that out. But beyond that, there's this struggle of expectations, and I think they can really weigh on us more than we think, or at least they have for me.
You know what you should say when people ask you what you do?
What?
You should say shaman.
Shaman? Okay, I will.
And that's the cool thing right now, is to have a shaman. So people will start adopting you, and they'll be like, oh, you got to meet my shaman, Sophie.
Yeah, no, it's true. Yeah.
She'll help you.
I'm actually, I have a shamanic session with someone on Sunday. So I'll have to tell you how that goes.
You're doing it for them?
No, I'm learning from them, because I'm still very much in the process of learning. Yeah, they do, although it is very much, I wouldn't say guarded, but it's sort of, the knowledge is protected in a way.
As it should be.
As it should be. Yes.
Well, if there's an opportunity for me to do that, I would love to.
Sounds good.
That's fun. Okay, of all the books that I've given you, what's your favorite one?
That you have given me?
Yeah.
Oh, it's got to be Merleau.
So Rape of the Mind, or the Delusions and Mass Delusions?
Oh gosh, they're both so good. I think, just his style of writing is so approachable, and yet he's saying the most profound thing. Oh. Yeah, that's a book that I want to highlight every single line. Yeah, because it's so good. It just hits you in the face, but it's so like quotable. So yeah.
And so true.
So true. Yeah.
It's all the stuff that nobody says.
Yeah.
And said so well.
Yeah. And it's, he's not necessarily obscure, but he kind of is. He never, he's certainly not as popular as Freud, but I think he has a lot more insight. Yeah. I've also really enjoyed exploring some of Jung's works, because I know I've, when we were doing research on the shadow and that, I've read a lot of Jung that I wouldn't have read otherwise, that has been really profound and interesting in terms of his study of story and myth, and then also the shadow work.
And the integration.
Yeah, the shadow integration. We all have to go through.
He's touching on alchemy too.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, the power of the mind. It's all about that, actually.
It's great. Well, thank you for doing this. I
Thank
really
you.
appreciate it.
This was so fun.
And that was a good one. And I got to know a lot more about you that
Good.
I knew some, but I didn't know all that.
Yeah.
So,
well, this was great. Thank you.